Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web at unnaturalshow.com.
It's that time of the morning where the vocal cords haven't quite
warmed up.
Yet.
Yeah. Several
so it sounds
nights
like I've either got
alcohol will do that.
Yep.
Yeah. So
I got throat disease, or I'm. Oh yes, it's been several big nights of dusty.
It's real dusty Springfield in here because we're dusty. So for context, we went to the Great Australian Beer Spectacular.
Is that what it's called? Actually,
I think that is part of the marketing. Spectacular.
Someone got paid a bonus for that.
Yeah, and it was good because we got to try a bunch of new beers.
Yes.
There was a news story this week that the Black Flag's barely legal would not actually be sold at this year's Gabs Festival.
Or was sold. They just called it something else.
They just called it something else.
Controversy.
So, what do you? I'm interested. As two males speaking on a podcast, let's speak about feminism and really nail it down once and for all. So there were concerns that obviously Black Flag. It sounded like a marketing gimmick to me. It sounded like they came up with the name first, and then were like, let's brew a beer that meets these constraints.
Yeah. Because the alcohol percentage was 18.1%,
which, if you know anything about beer, is ludicrous. That's basically, you could wash the windows with it. It also doubles up as a spirit. Yeah. So it sounds like they came up with let's call it barely legal, and we'll call it 18.1, right? Get it? Just over 18. And then decided to go full swing into the marketing. And if you looked at the marketing, it had barely legal, but it had it in the sort of Pornhub type font and colors. So it's clearly meant to be like a sexual thing. And then obviously people got annoyed and they took it down. But yeah, as Adam correctly stated, one of our friends did get a paddle from Black Flag, and there was mysteriously a beer called something else. What was it called? Do you remember what it was called?
The beery beer?
The beery beer. Yeah. Which was 18.1% also. Mysteriously, they just changed the label from barely legal to, and then put a not sign across it like a real estate agent, not barely legal.
George,
something
what
else.
we can learn about this is that in the corporate world, they listen, they learn, and they act responsibly.
Yeah. I place a lot of faith in corporations. Which brings us to our first story. PricewaterhouseCoopers has come under fire in the last couple of weeks for its actions in regards to their tax practitioners. So,
the long story.
It is a long story.
There's a lot of context. Where do we start? Do we start with the government consultation process?
Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know, the previous Liberal governments were big fans of consultants, and they like to
loved a good consultant, and
it really would try and steer, quite a lot of business to consultancies, and as Americans would know, with the revolving door of Congress, there's something similar going on here between the revolving door of government and government policymaking and the four big consultancy firms, of which PricewaterhouseCoopers, or PwC, is one. And according to an audit that was released a couple of weeks ago by the federal government, in the last year of the Morrison government, so it's the previous Liberal government, they spent approximately $20.8 billion on external advisors, which effectively outsourced about a third of the public service.
So the public service only has, what was it, like however many jobs? Is the equivalent of about 50,000 public service jobs.
54,000.
54,000.
Not to, I don't want to, not to be a nitpicker here, but what's 4,000 jobs between friends? Yeah, 54,000 full-time public sector jobs were effectively outsourced from the public service.
So the public service is as small. Well, what's your expression? That it's so small that you could drown it in a bathtub or something.
Yeah, well, that's certainly that certainly was the attempt from the Liberal national government, as they were trying to make the size of government so small that they could drown it in a bathtub.
But,
yeah, to borrow a
Deloitte
phrase.
and Boston Consulting Group did very well out of it.
They did very well. We do well. So, that's not good in and of itself, obviously. And having a lot of, speaking of that revolving door, having a lot of people rotating back and forth between government policymaking and, the accounting firms and consulting firms is not good, and the financial sector as well, because oftentimes, it could be conceived of that there might be a conflict of interest there if you had someone who was recently at Goldman Sachs running financial policy. Maybe that's not a good idea.
Conflict of interest.
Yeah, one more conflict of interest in Australian government, and we get a free coffee.
You get a free coffee.
So we
one of the other
card.
5 sounds, but anyway.
So ATSIC in the past has accused the Australian Securities and Investment Commission also has similar kinds of problems, and in the past they've been accused of pandering to the financial sector, which they're supposed to be sort of regulating, and again, similar sorts of things going back and forth. So that's the background. That's the historical milieu in which we find ourselves today. So the specific story is that at PricewaterhouseCoopers in 2014, it's emerged that they were contracted at that time to help come up with a new multinational tax scheme. Basically, the government said, hey, there's a bunch of multinational companies avoiding tax, particularly large American tech companies with whom we are all familiar. I don't want to name any names. just when you think big American tech companies with lots of money avoiding multinational tax obligations, that's the one. And essentially, PricewaterhouseCoopers was brought in to help consult and develop this policy. And
it was one gentleman
in particular,
and who was. I mean, there were other people involved. It was a large project, obviously, and it was flogged off at the time by Joe Hockey. It's sort of their, as part of their 2014 budget where they cut the shit out of everything and were like, but we're going to raise money by cracking down on. Anyway.
It was seen as not too politically unpopular at the time to levy taxes on multinational corporations because they're not the ones that are generally donating to the Liberal Party. So it's a safe bet.
Tom Seymour was the guy's name that was on part of the board, I think, from PricewaterhouseCoopers. Is that
no? Tom Seymour was the CEO who resigned shortly thereafter.
He resigned. Yeah, I've just jumped ahead about 3 different things.
That's all right. Fine. So the person in question was Peter Collins. So he's a former senior tax partner at PwC, and essentially what happened was that in 2014, Mr. Collins shared confidential tax information with other partners and staff about a federal government initiative to clamp down on multinational tax avoidance.
Hang on. So you mean the guy who was consulting about how to clamp down?
I don't know how directly he was involved with the project, but he had access to information about what the government was planning to do.
Sure. He was on the committee. Whatever.
Sure. He was on the working group. There was a whip. There was a fucking, shared Google.
Slack chat.
Yeah, exactly. He was on the Google sheet. Let's put it that way. So he had information. So what he decided to do, that very confidential Australian government public information about how they were planning on, minimizing multinational tax avoidance. And he said, who'd be interested in this? The multinational companies that are planning on avoiding tax, minimizing their tax.
It's almost like that's our client base.
Yeah. And so he shared information with other partners and staff about this federal government initiative. And at first,
30
it
to
was
40 people, allegedly.
Yeah, so it was like, I think it was like 9. The numbers are in here somewhere, so I don't want to guess. 6 to 8 senior partners were shared the confidential information, and another 30 to 40 were on email trails, but were unaware that the information was secret, including Mr. Tom Seymour, the CEO. So obviously, that's not good. But the information that came out was at the time was like, we shared the information internally. Maybe some people internally probably shouldn't have had that information because it's confidential information, but no harm, no foul, right? It's not like we tried to do anything with it. Smash cut to, they did try and do something with it. So emails released by Labor Senator Deborah O'Neill recently contain correspondence about PwC's North American project from 2016, stating, in total, we expect, based on fee estimates that we have agreed with clients, that revenue from this first stage of the multinational anti-avoidance law will be approximately 2.5 million. This is from an unknown associate or partner. And then this unknown partner goes on to say, quote, we were aggressive in telling these relationships they needed to act early, in parentheses, heavily helped by the accuracy of the intelligence that Peter Collins was able to supply us and our analysis of the politics, end parentheses, the unnamed partner wrote. So basically what you're saying is we've got a plan to go to market in North America. We really want to raise some revenue in North America, and we're aggressive in telling these relationships that we already have with these big multinational firms that they needed to act early and do business with us, right, is the implication, to avoid...
Save on your tax bill.
Yeah.
Something. At least 14 firms were approached. So it wasn't like one or two.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It was over.
But it's so funny to me that, like, for a firm that has a revenue of $2.8 billion, like PricewaterhouseCoopers is one of the big four.
Billion with a B.
Billion with a B. Big old B. It seems like billings of $2.5 million sounds like a lot to us, because it is. But in the grand scheme of things, at like a large consulting firm, to get an extra $2.5 million in billables out of this and risk the relationship that you have with the Australian government and the public confidence for a couple of $1 million is like...
Win.
No, I think that might be robbing Peter to get your legs broken by Paul. Like, it doesn't seem to be the greatest use of resources in the company. And it's like, you know, these are professionals, right? These are seasoned professionals. Peter Collins had signed multiple non-disclosure agreements as a result of having contact with this information. Like, I don't know if you all know how the corporate world works. Like, this is exactly what is not supposed to happen when confidential government information is shared with a consulting firm. There's reams of paperwork. Anytime, before you even get to the stage where you're discussing this sort of stuff, multiple layers of people
NDA, bro.
Need to sign NDAs. For those of you who don't know, non-disclosure agreement, which is... The non is the particularly important part of that sentence, is the non-disclosure of the confidential information therein. And that includes sometimes, depending on the agreement, members within your own organization. It's called an ethical wall, okay, that a lot of organizations have, especially consulting firms, with regard to the separation between their auditing functions and their consulting functions, right? So what happens is a lot of these firms, these big consulting firms, they'll have multiple different business lines. You know, you'll have the people who audit, and they need to be strictly not associated with the consulting side and with, you know, people making recommendations, because there's a conflict of interest there. The audit is supposed to be completely impartial, right? I go in, I see if your financials are good, and if you're compliant, and I can't be influenced by any of these other factors that are going on in the outside world, right? Because if I'm also doing business with you from a consulting perspective and I want you to make money, I might say, yeah, actually your audit's all good. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine, because you're giving us money on the other side, which is exactly the problem that happened at Enron, right? So there's a big scandal back in the day where one company was essentially supplying both consulting services and auditing services and going, yep, it's all good.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. Nothing to see here, buddy. And so ever since then, there's been a really strict line in consulting firms. Sorry, this is just MBA chat with George. Adam can participate at some point. There's been a really strict... There's been a really strict line between different functions of the business and real concerns from an ethical perspective to make sure that the consultancy firms are acting appropriately. So that's what the ethical wall is, basically. It's like a line between the people doing this kind of work. It's not necessarily auditing and consult, but that's just an example. The people doing this kind of sensitive work over here can't tell the people doing this other kind of work over here what they know. It's an ethical wall between those two divisions, right?
What we're trying to say here is that
They
by
smashed
doing
through
all
it.
this, they've smashed through that ethical wall and broken it. It's in a million pieces on the floor.
It's that scene.
There's been a bulldozer that's come through.
It's the scene in the Two Towers where the Uruk-hai's running with explosive towards the wall, and then it's Aragorn saying, Legolas, kill him! And he goes, soup, 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 takes a couple of arrows. It's just, oh God, I'm making a meme in the process. It's just PWC. It's just Peter Collins over the head of the Uruk-hai, just running at the ethical wall with explosives. There we go. That's how we turned it into comedy. It was news. That whole first part was news, and that was the comedy part. You're welcome. So,
I guess the thing that I found, the thing that probably got me was that, okay, well, yeah, it's probably bound to happen at some point. I'm sure it's not the first time it's happened.
I'm certain it's not the first time.
But the way PwC handled the whole thing was farcical.
Yeah, it wasn't
because
good.
They did the whole thing of like, we'll downplay, we'll deny. The CEO was like, nah, it's all good, bro. And then
at first, they were saying that we didn't actually sell any of the information.
Yeah.
Like, it was okay. Yes, there was a bit of a conflict of interest in sharing that information widely, but it wasn't, it's not a big deal. We didn't capitalize off it. Turns out you did capitalize off it. It's like, okay, yes, we capitalized off it a little bit, but it wasn't too much. Like, actually, a bunch of people knew it was a whole coordinated effort. Like, this email from one of these partners basically says, like, thanks to Peter Collins breaching confidentiality, we're able to make some sweet, sweet cash off of this. Like, okay, but it was limited to like a number, it was just a couple of bad apples. It's like, actually, no, dozens of people knew about this and worked on it. Like, yes, dozens of people knew about it, but not the CEO. And then the CEO was like, actually, I was CC'd on these emails. So it's like, it started as this very Antipodean, like, sort of ANZ focused, Australia focused conflict. And it's like, but certainly it doesn't have contagion for the wider organization. And then, of course, drip, drip, drip. And it's turned out to be one of the biggest scandals in recent memory. So
Tom Seymour stepped down, as well as two other board members, Peter Kaliger and Sean Gregory. They've resigned from their leadership positions. I believe they're still partners at the company or something.
Yeah,
like that.
they've stood aside from their management roles, but they'll stay at the firm.
To get dividends.
I don't know how that works. It's like, I'm no longer a front bencher anymore. I've resigned in disgrace. Still going to vote from the back bench though, but still got a lot of money involved in this situation here. So I'm not just going to. Obviously, I'm a multi-millionaire thanks to my work at this firm. So I'm not just going to step aside, but I'm going to get rid of my leadership responsibilities, which I guess means you're still getting paid. You just have less responsibility, which kind of sounds like a vacation. If that's how that works. I would love to step aside from my responsibilities, but still get paid. That sounds great. How do I do that? How do I get that job?
Historically as well, like Seymour's been downplaying this for like the last 6 years. In 2015, there was a Senate inquiry on corporate tax avoidance, which I guess is part of this whole thing. And then Mr. Seymour, who was then the head of tax, seated beside Mr. Collins, the man who leaked the information, said that they would never advise a client to avoid income tax. And they said, I quote, "I have the utmost faith in the ethical standards of the people we employ. I certainly would be shocked and hugely disappointed if anyone in our firm is breaching laws."
Shocked. I'm shocked to find gambling. I'm shocked to find gambling in this casino.
Jesus Christ. That was in 2015.
Yeah. It was a pre-Trump world. I mean, shameless lying hadn't reached its zenith just quite yet. They really had to, they were still perfecting it. Yeah.
So Labor's now announced another inquiry.
Oh, good.
into the whole situation.
Well, let us know in 6 to 12 business years how that panned out.
Will do. And that's the thing, is that they'll lawyer up. And the ABC article, which we're referencing here, the point that they were trying to make was that ultimately there'll be probably no issue. There'll be no jail time. There'll be maybe a fine to the organization at some point, like worst case scenario.
Oh, the biggest punishment is that the government's going to use different consultants probably for this sort of stuff in the future. Like, they'll lose billables. That's the real punishment.
Yeah.
But no one's going to jail, certainly. A couple of people lost their job. Oh, it's just a couple bad apples. And they always say that, but everyone forgets the second part of that phrase, which is a couple of rotten apples spoil the barrel. Yeah. It's not to say that there was a singular bad apple and we located him and he's been dispatched. Don't worry. Business as usual. Back to BAU, folks. The whole point is that having a bad apple in the barrel infects other apples, which is exactly what we saw, was that dozens of other people then got pulled into this scheme.
The barrel.
In the barrel. Yeah. So, and it's not as though it's a small amount of people. Like
Big barrel.
It's a big barrel, and there's a lot of rotten apples in this barrel. You have to find the good apples, is what it seems like.
Like, if you've ever seen like a compost bin, it's a smelly bacterial mess is kind of what we're getting at here.
Oh, look, an apple. A nice clean apple.
I threw that one in this morning because it's not as bad.
It's not as bad. He just got here. It's his first day.
But the point the ABC article was trying to get at was that meanwhile, a former public servant, Richard Boyle, has actually, in the last couple of days, lost his legal bid to be declared immune from prosecution as a whistleblower. Now, he worked for the tax department and basically is accused of 24 offences, including recording and disclosing protected information stemming from his decision to collect information about the unethical debt recovery practices within the ATO. So I think they're talking about robo-debt there, effectively, as far as I'm aware.
So basically, he was a whistleblower. He said, look, there's a bunch of unethical debt recovery practices going on at the ATO. I'm going to blow the whistle about it and let the public know, because it is by definition something that is of the public interest. It's the kind of thing that whistleblower protections were literally designed for, was to help public servants and even people in the private sector to alert the public of wrongdoing that affected them. But he's not going to get immunity for the prosecution of those 24 offences and likely faces a lifetime in jail. So here's the difference between the public sector and the private sector, right? You know, a lot of people talk shit about the public sector, saying, oh, it's slow, it's inefficient. Oh, you got to just outsource it all to fucking consultants. What we need is a 23-year-old sleep-deprived Melbourne University graduate with 3 hours of sleep and 5 Red Bulls in him deciding government policy. That is much more efficient, okay? We need him punching durries outside of the office building at 3 a.m. before he heads back for the rest of his all-nighter. That's the guy who can efficiently dictate government policy right after he's just done a stint at Goldman. Okay? That's how financial policy works.
There's a team of 20 of them.
Yeah, in their
what substance abuse issues? In
their corporate cowboy boots and puffer vests, in their R.M. Williams and Kathmandu puffer vests, standing outside in the cold at 11 p.m. before heading back inside to just reel off another couple of government financial policies for their corporate overlords.
That's what the thing, is that, the government will deal with the nice man in the suit who got flown to Canberra to sit in the Qantas lounge and yada, 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 yada.
Yeah.
But he just goes back to his business and then says to the consultants, or to the people that are even below the consultants, the associates or whoever's below that, I need this done by 5 p.m.
Yeah.
And then those people have a mental breakdown as part of the process.
Yeah.
I've got friends that have worked for these firms, and they definitely spend a lot of money on, like, the firms try to compensate for these crazy hours by, like, just giving people, like, massive parties and, like, spending lots of money.
Oh, it's the same thing in tech.
Activities.
Like, the software as a service world is famous for, like, I've never really worked at these sorts of companies, but you're aware that they're out there. But, like, taking people out to lunches and doing big parties, like, it's the end of quarter and we hit budget. We're going to hire a boat and get shit-faced on the Yarra or whatever. Like that is a thing that, consultancies and software companies do. And I think it really is because it's a way of incentivizing people who you're paying a fairly regular, or maybe a slightly inflated wage if you're looking at the associate level. If the partners are making, squillions, sure. Yeah. But the people at the bottom, that bottom level of the pyramid who we're talking about, who are doing all the work, they're making a normal living. They're not making a shitload of money. Right, these people
above average, but it's not
above average, but it's not incredible.
You're still going to struggle to buy a house in Melbourne.
Sure, you're not a millionaire, so it's and that's how they sort of incentivize them with all of these sort of corporate benefits. And I'll look at, yes, you need to work until 11 p.m. most nights, and we're going to judge you if you clock off at 8. But, like, party. Remember that party we had where we all, like, did bags on the Yarra. Like, that was pretty sick. Hey, like, keep working. So it is, they are probably the associates, as in any firm, right? Law firms and all these other kind of, big firms are the same, where it's like all the wealth and all the value accrues to the top, the partners, the handful of people at the top, and everyone else at the bottom is basically like meat grinder fodder for, and it's a war of attrition. If you can be the guy that just like works the hardest and hangs on the longest, for 10 to 15 years, you too could be a partner / millionaire. But for most people, it's like, what's that? It's like 5 out of every 100 people that churn through the business actually end up making it to that point. So you've just got this entire workforce of like disillusioned, overworked, overcaffeinated, highly strung, underslept 20-year-olds that are essentially writing government policy for us. And that is legitimately terrifying.
I mean, the other aspect of the public service is that a lot of public service jobs these days are contract. So this is the other aspect to the whole, gutting of the public service is the ones that are there are contract positions, which are say 1 or 2 years.
1 year.
So I was looking at some jobs the other day, and they were for 12 months. I was like, well, what's the point? I don't want to have to go and and everyone's like, oh, once you're in, they'll just move around. No, it's not. Like, sometimes, yes, once you've got a network up, but you still have to get the network.
You still need to create the network and
you still have to then
build expertise.
It's not a job that you'll have for 20 years, and you can rest assured and have that meant you can rest easy on that. My friend recently just changed jobs, and he's on a new contract now with a different department. But for 6 months there, he was just sweating about how he was going to then transition to his next role.
Yeah.
So how are they meant to do their jobs effectively if all they're thinking about is what they're going to be doing next?
Existential pressure of like, am I going to have a paycheck in 6 months, in 5 months, in 4 months? Like. Yeah,
and
no,
this is where it makes sense. It's like you've got.
Sorry, go on. You go.
There are some things where it makes sense, where it's like you've got big projects like the Big Build, Victoria level crossing removals, whatever, a highway project, where it's like, oh, okay, well that's got a finite lifetime. You need to surge and then contract the workforce. Sure, but when it comes to policy making, you'd think there'd be some consistency with that. And Labor pointed this out when they first got into government like a year ago, whatever it was.
They were just like, nobody's here. The offices are empty. There's spider webs. What's happened?
And this goes towards that culture, I guess, doesn't it? Anyway, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, like, it's not an accident that we've arrived at this point. Essentially, like, what we have is the result of about 30 years of neoliberal government policy, where ever since the Reagan era, it's all been, it's been about slash and burn. What fat can we trim from the public service? What can we cut away, make it more efficient, more agile, right? But what happens when you do that is that you shed a bunch of expertise. And where do these people go? If you're previously working in government service as the ATO, where are your skills relevant? Well, probably the big 4 consulting firms, probably accounting firms, probably financial advisory and high finance and things like that. Like, there are only so many places that really value those skills. And so what happens is government cuts the fat because government doesn't work, right? A bunch of neoliberals and conservatives get into government. They get hired to be in charge of government. And they say, government doesn't work. We're dismantling government. And so they pull apart all of these permanent public sector jobs. All of the institutional knowledge and expertise goes out the door and goes to these consulting firms. And so they go, well, we need to hire the consulting firms to get the experts to tell us what to do because we don't have any experts in-house anymore. And then they turn around and charge you 10 times what it would be to have that person in-house in order to give you the information back to you that you already had. And so what happens is it's a systemic, self-reinforcing hollowing out of the public service and all of the expertise within to where we get to the stage where these consultancies are now kind of necessary for the functioning of government to happen properly. So it's like the advice from the consultancies has been like, save money, hire us out. It's kind of like I'm reticent to make this comparison, but it's kind of like a drug dealer, right? First hit's free and then you need it. And now you can't stop having it.
I mean, I guess the thing being is that, the upside is that if push comes to shove, they can just stop hiring the the consultancy firms, if the budget doesn't allow, right, you can say, well, there's less projects, we don't need to hire as much stuff, and it means that the budget for the purposes of political purposes can be flexible.
Okay, but you're assuming that there aren't experts in each one of these firms that have existing relationships with key stakeholders in government, that their sole job is to develop business and find other projects and contracts.
Lobby, yeah.
To essentially lobby them and say like, hey, we've got this relationship. What else can we do for you? Can we help you with this? Can we help you with that? It is in the interests of all of these consultancies to have a continuous pipeline of work. There are processes built in from a sales and business development perspective to make sure that you've lined up the next project before the current one is even finished, for that exact reason, because you want to have a consistent pipeline of business going through. So that it's not as though the government can just go, no, mate, I'm going cold turkey. I don't need yous anymore. because these consultancies will come back, just another hit. It's only a wafer thin.
It's only a $2 million project.
It's just only a $2 million project. Just a little baby project.
It's
really bad. It's kind of
yeah.
It makes our democracy sick because it hollows out all of the expertise. I agree with you. Things like the big build, you're not going to need all of these employees in 5 years because as you say, we're scaling up, and once the project's finished, we're scaling down. But in the rest of the economy, when you're talking about policy making, it seems like it's a pretty obvious conflict of interest to have a revolving door between accountancy and consulting firms and the people who write our public policy in regards to finance and tax. Like, that's a very obvious conflict of interest, and it makes sense to have those people hired in-house and not give this work out to consultancies.
And it's kind of a meme now as well, where it's like, especially like, if not the public service, but the like politicians, where like Gladys or whoever, who was the guy.
Interestingly, in a spectacular show of morals, PwC turned down Scott Morrison for a cushy role at their consulting firm for brand image issues. But that is exactly the kind of people that go and sort of transition in and out of these consulting.
Like it's almost become like just farcical. It's like, oh well, if you were a minister, you're basically guaranteed a job at one of these big consulting firms, or you could go private and get paid the same thing as well. It's hilarious. The other thing that you sort of see with this, and I guess the other effect, is that you'll often see, when people are talking about projects or things that they'll do in the public sphere, government will always announce, and Utopia is great at doing this as a TV show, but there'll be
new season of Utopia coming in June. Very excited.
There'll be a feasibility study or some sort of like scoping study that they'll do. And that scoping study will cost like $40 million or something stupid. And the reason why it costs so much is because they've paid a bunch of consultants to do it from an external organization. It hasn't been done in-house by public service.
And so by the time you even get to the regulatory complexity. Like, I do acknowledge that, like, when you're doing a feasibility study, like now you need to consider the three-winged combat or something like, and or the four-legged trollop lizard or something like that, like all of these things 40, 50 years ago didn't exist, right? You didn't have to do all these kind of land surveys and test the ground for poisons and mercury and this, like, this is all stuff that's come about in the last couple of decades, and it's good.
The three-winged combat did not exist 20 years
and he started COVID. I think we should have wiped him out. But
three-winged
but the point is like, some of it is complexity. A lot of the projects, running a mega project now is much more complex than it was doing it 50, 100 years ago, right? The New York subway system was built with wood and they just fucking built it. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't, things have gotten more complex since then, and you need specialized expertise and you need to do feasibility studies, and that stuff is expensive. But I think you're right in that, getting consultants to do all this work, you go, the consultants empty out the government service, and then the government service goes, oh, we don't actually have the capability to do this. We need to outsource it to consultants. And so it's this parasitic relationship where now government actually can't do the functions of government without these consultancies. And that's why neoliberalism is bad. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
And I guess you also get
efficiencies
for a lot of these firms.
We got so efficient. We got so efficient.
It's probably a wage question as well, where it used to be that public service would be probably one of the best paid jobs you can get. And now these consultancy firms are probably the best paid job you can get, except, in situations where you are at the bottom and you are getting sort of screwed.
Well, that's the whole reason that they justified outsourcing these jobs in the first place. You go, look, you got this huge public sector, you've got all these people working on the government dime, and sometimes there's more to do, sometimes there's less to do. You've got inefficiency in the system.
You've got your super that's like a 14%.
You've got super, you've got pensions, you've got, it is a massively expensive endeavor to have these people on. But I guess what I'm saying is, in the long run, it's still worth it. It's still better than the situation that we've got now, where a large part of it has been privatized. And so once it's been privatized, once they've got the contracts, they've got you over a barrel, because you can't just then go cold turkey and switch it off because of the reasons we've just mentioned. So
meanwhile, what's the group that own the roads in Melbourne?
Vic Roads, Eastlink.
No.
The group that
Who
owns
the roads. ETAG.
ETAG is Eastlink or CityLink.
No. I think
we're going, we don't need roads.
We don't need roads. Don't worry about it. I'll come back to it. But basically, there's one, the group that owns all the toll roads in Melbourne and that are building a large proportion of these projects for ostensibly free. The reason why they're doing it is because they have a contract which will allow them to charge tolls till the end of time.
Transurban.
Transurban. Thank you very much.
They own a bunch of roads. So
the government's doing all this cool stuff, but I mean, we'll be paying for it for a long time.
Well, and a toll road is actually a perfect example of this neoliberal fallacy coming home to roost. Because so many assessments have been done, it never works out better for the taxpayer. The reason people do it, toll roads, is they're like, okay, well, it's going to be a government and it's going to be a public-private partnership. The taxpayer is going to have to stump up less money now, and it's going to look good for us in this budget cycle because we haven't had to stump up all the money for this road. We get the road, and yes, the company gets to charge you tolls on it for the next 20, 30 years. And so all of it's called a negative externality, right? All of the consequences of the government, quote unquote, saving this money, you don't see it on their budget, so they can turn around and declare a surplus at the next election. That's not paid by them. The money's paid by us, the commuters who use the road over the next 20 to 30 years. And the amount that's paid by the taxpayer always is more than if the public sector just built the road themselves in the first place, which is the point. That's why that's why Transurban, that's why these toll companies do it, because it's a financial investment for them, because they're going to make more money if they do it that
Melbourne
way.
hasn't had a a railway to the airport for the last 60 years because Transurban had a contract on the Tullamarine Freeway.
Yeah.
Anyway. So corporate shit sucks.
It's kind of worse now that I've studied the NBA, because I really fully understand how badly we're getting fucked.
Do we need to?
For the NBA. It is good and bad. Obviously, knowledge is power, and it's great to know things. But it does suck when you see this PwC scandal unfolding like this, and you're like, "Yep, that was obvious and predictable." And I'm sure it is not, as you said, not the first time it's happened. It won't be the last. I'm sure that this is happening daily in consultancy firms across Australia, where what should be confidential government information is being given to the people who should least have it, because they are the clients of the consultants. That is happening today, and that is not going to stop as long as consultants are an integral part of government functioning.
But it's all good. Everything's fine.
Everything's fine.
The Senate inquiry, Labor announced, will fix it all.
You know what we really need to worry about? Is fucking dole bludgers. It's fucking welfare queens stealing your money, your hard-earned tax dollars at work. As fucking dole bludgers. The people right at the bottom of the pyramid doing it worst. Those are the real pirates. Those are the ones really stealing all the value from us. It's not the guy at PricewaterhouseCoopers who makes more money than God selling government secrets. That's not the guy who's stooging us. It's the poor and the immigrants.
You know who else is stooging us, George?
Jesus Christ.
Google are stooging us.
No, not Google. Surely not Google.
This is an article.
In a completely unrelated story, Google.
Google have offered a new web domain. Now, obviously, webdomain.com, .org,
.jizz.
can't think of any other. Yeah, .jizz, dot whatever you want it to be.
.us.
.us. .gov.au.
.me. There's all sorts of fun URL suffixes out there.
And I don't really understand what the utility of a lot of these are, but Google have now offered a new .zip, ZIP, web domain for users who want to know they're fast, efficient, and ready to move. So, if you're a courier company, you might be like, well, we'll use a .zip web domain.
Oh,
people will know that I'm fast.
Trustworthy. It's Adam's packages.zip.
Of course, therefore, a link would go something like www.
AdamsPackages.zip.
Adam's Packages.
SpeedyPete's.zip.
.zip. Zip also, for those people who love computers, is a file that Windows uses to compress things together.
So when you're putting a bunch of information into an email and you want it to be below a certain size so it can send in the email, you would zip those files and it basically creates a compressed folder that puts all of those files into, and you can hopefully email it because it's under the 10 megabyte limit.
Literally did it the other day because I was like, what is this 45 megabyte limit? Photos are 8 megabytes.
Is it 45?
These days.
That's pretty good.
At my work, it was 45. I was like,
nice. No, hey. Nice.
It wasn't 69. So anyway, so a lot of people are saying, well, obviously it's a marketing ploy by Google who are trying to sell domains, right? It's a money thing. But the risk being is people on the internet who are all wonderful actors and have no bad intentions and definitely want everyone to live in harmony and peace.
Adam, I don't know where you're going with this, but this doesn't sound that good. I don't know about
those
this.
Kind of people may potentially use the links or use URLs which contain a .zip reference, and people may think they're going to a website, but they're actually downloading a file which potentially could contain various bits of malicious software, which means grandma who doesn't quite understand what she's clicking on, who just wants to get the present to her son's birthday by clicking on Speedy Pete's Couriers, has actually just downloaded software which will take all her financial information and put images of Dennis Rodman on her computer for no apparent reason.
Yeah, no, it's just downloading a little what's this, lemonparty.zip? That looks interesting. Yep. What's going on there? Oh no, it's a virus.
So one would think at Google, before you high-five each other and go to lunch, you might go, maybe this is a bad idea, but money.
No, it's okay. Google got rid of the "Don't be evil" tagline many years ago now at this point, so don't worry about it.
They're all good. Watch this space, but I guess it's just another little reminder. Just be careful of what you click on, guys. Just be careful of what you click on because there could be mean stuff hiding in links all the time. And as someone who has downloaded viruses and had all my personal information stolen, I can attest to that.
Yeah. It's, I think, yes, be careful, obviously. Don't click on links from unknown places and, watch out for emails that, come from a weird email address or, where things are spelled poorly. But I think with ChatGPT, all of this is about to go this identity theft and phishing attacks and this stuff's about to go Super Saiyan. We don't know what's about to hit us in terms of the kind of identity theft stuff that's going to be coming out now that you've got tools like ChatGPT out in the wild. It's going to get crazy. I think all of us are going to get got.
The thing
at
is,
some point, we just need to have better ways of locking down people's identities and proving this stuff because I think everyone's going to get got at some point.
You can imagine those chat bots that pop up on websites where it's hi, can I help you? Imagine a chat that they are chat bots similar to ChatGPT where they sort of qualify leads and everything else.
Brands are already incorporating ChatGPT into their chatbot software. That's already happening. What
if a chatbot went up against a chatbot to see who could I'm just trying to say who is it going to be? Chatbots fighting other chatbots to try and scam each other?
Rock'em sock'em robots.
Yeah. Might be entertaining. I don't know.
Well, that's all the entertainment we'll have once the temperatures have risen and all the wheat's gone. We'll just sit in a virtual room watching AIs fight each other.
Either that, or you could move to Argentina because things are going great.
I hear the standard of living in Argentina is great at the moment.
It's not terrible, the standard of living, but they do have. If you think interest rates are bad here,
they are,
and you're paying lots on your mortgage.
I am.
So what are they here? Like I think the Reserve Bank's interest rates are what, 4% or something?
Cash rate is gone. I'll get the exact number for you in 1 second. Keep talking.
We'll just do a little soundboard, bit of golf clapping.
You're so thrilled with the soundboard. Honestly, I'm so embarrassed for you that you're so entertained by it.
It's like there's like 6 sounds on it.
So the current RBA cash rate is 3.85%. So currently you can get sort of mortgages around the sort of 5.3%. And that's going to be increasing, obviously, as those come through.
Do you want to take a guess? Well, you don't have to guess because the article's there.
I've seen the article. No, I prepared for this. So.
Yeah. It's 97% in Argentina. 97%.
You didn't want to
use a soundboard?
Yeah.
Oh, you do the honors. 97%.
That's too many percent.
Argentina.
That's too much.
Has the highest level. It's the highest level in Argentina since the 1990s. And currently, Venezuela and Zimbabwe are the only 2 countries experiencing higher inflation than Argentina. And they are not good countries to compare to, as it were.
Zimbabwe historically has an inflation. It's a bit of an inflation whoopsie that's happened in Zimbabwe.
It's been happening for like 30 years since Zimbabwe was founded, basically.
A big whoopsie then.
Yeah. So I think I've talked about this previously on the show, but Argentina has this weird thing where people basically like the meaning of money in Argentina has kind of become meaningless.
This happened with Zimbabwe back in the day, and in early 1900s Germany after the First World War was that inflation gets so out of control and so rampant that paper money becomes basically worthless. You'd have to go and take a wagon full of paper money to go and get a loaf of bread, sort of thing. Like money just becomes silly buggers because nothing means anything anymore. And people, I remember hearing stories from Germany back in the day where people would like wallpaper their houses with like cash paper money because it was like just paper. It was just completely worthless.
Good insulative material. But the thing is, like, what Argentina's central bank are trying to do is encourage investment into the currency because, it's 97% interest. Like, you'll get a return.
We'll get a great return on that 97% interest rate.
The problem is
pretty
that
good.
The currency is deflating so fast. But even people in Argentina are just like, well, I guess I'll just go get US dollars instead and we'll trade in that because at least the currency is stable.
That's what tends to happen, and that's why the US in particular enjoys its position as the world's reserve currency. You might have heard that phrase before, where basically it means other countries' economies tend to do things like this from time to time, especially in South America, probably as a direct result of covert US CIA intervention and toppling governments and things like that, which has been known to happen from time to time. Just ask John Bolton. But a lot of these South American countries that have these issues will then turn to the US currency and basically just trade in US dollars. So I'm a guy in Argentina, but I've got US currency and I'm going to buy this loaf of bread for $2 and I know it's going to stay $2 because it's the good old US greenback, right?
Meanwhile, the pesos have gone up 1,000 in 24 hours.
So it's not unusual. And a lot of world, like international currency business transactions happen in US dollars. There's been some talk in recent months about China and Russia getting together to try and form their own sort of currency union and try and break that stranglehold that the US has, because it means they get to, if you control all the money, if it's all your money, it means you can basically borrow unlimited money to do whatever you want with, which is what the US has been doing and what they're arguing about with the debt ceiling at the moment is they've just kept borrowing unlimited money for decades. But it also means you can control global commerce And if you freeze money in your currency that you can control, then other governments get locked out and you can use it for sanctions and all sorts of other stuff. So the country that has the global reserve currency, the currency that everyone basically uses to back their shit, means they have an unreal amount of power in the rest of the world. So that's why China and Russia are sort of trying to create their own situation there. But I don't particularly see that panning out very well for them.
Yeah, it's a fun time. Now I have to go to a breakfast because I'm a very important person who has lots of things to do in his life.
Oh, well, I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
Do we want to? So what's the go for Argentina? What's the plan? How do they plan to get out of this?
There's a government that's going to roll out a policy, allegedly. Okay. But,
it's all right. It's all right because the policy was authored by PwC. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at our handle, Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and our blessed TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at George Tsipos.
You can follow me down to the headquarters of Deloitte, where I'll be looking for a job to begin my way working up the pyramid, and a crippling meth addiction to help it get along.
To those about to enter into consultancy service, we salute you. Thanks for listening, guys. We love your faces. We'll see you next week.
I haven't got anything else to add. No, not today.